The music they made was immortal, but the artists themselves were not. These heavy metal icons seemed invincible on stage, but they were fighting a losing battle against alcohol addiction. We're counting down the stars who were completely destroyed by the bottle, and the tragic tale of the cherry pie guy is a true heartbreaker. 1. Bon Scott. Many people are crazy about the band AC/DC, and for a lot of fans, Bon Scott was its one true voice. With his gritty, powerful vocals and wild man energy, he helped turn the Australian band into global superstars. Songs like Highway to Hell weren't just songs, they were anthems for a generation. Bon lived the rock star life to the fullest. He was the life of the party, a charming rogue who always had a bottle in his hand and a story to tell. His hard-living image was a huge part of the band's appeal. They were dangerous, they were loud, and they were real. But the thing nobody tells you is that the image was all too real. Bon's relationship with the bottle was not just for show. It was a deep and destructive habit. What many overlooked was that his constant partying was taking a serious toll. Band members would later recall that his overindulgence was getting worse and worse. He was a professional on stage, but off stage he was spiraling. The most shocking fact is how quickly it all came to an end. In February of 1980, after a night of heavy drinking in London, Bon Scott passed out in a friend's car. He was left there to sleep it off, a decision that would prove to be a fatal mistake. He was found unresponsive the next morning. At just 33 years old, the voice of a generation was silenced by what was officially called acute alcohol poisoning. Losing a singer is a tragedy, but what happens when a band loses its very heartbeat? 2. John Bonham. When you talk about the greatest drummers of all time, the name John Bonham is always at the top of the list. He was the thunderous engine behind Led Zeppelin, one of the biggest and most powerful bands in history. His drumming wasn't just keeping time, it was an event. His famous solo on the song Moby Dick could last for over 20 minutes, a display of power and skill that left audiences breathless. The band was legendary for its massive success and its equally massive backstage antics. They defined the term rock star excess, with stories of trashed hotel rooms and wild parties following them around the world. At the center of it all was Bonham, a man with a huge talent and an even bigger appetite for chaos. You see, his reputation as a heavy drinker was as legendary as his drumming. They called him Bonzo, and his capacity for alcohol was astonishing. To put it mildly, he could outdrink almost anyone. But this wasn't just fun and games. It was a serious problem that was beginning to affect the band. He would sometimes show up to the studio too unwell to play properly, and his behavior could be unpredictable. The band was growing worried, but it was hard to stop the train once it was moving at full speed. The final party came to a horrifying end in September of 1980. While preparing for a North American tour, Bonham started drinking early in the day. The shocking detail is that he reportedly consumed around 40 shots of vodka before passing out. He was put to bed at guitarist Jimmy Page's house, but he never woke up. The 32-year-old had met the same fate as Bon Scott. Bonham's passing didn't just end his life, it ended the band. But for our next star, the end came much slower. 3. Steve Clark. In the 1980s, Def Leppard was on top of the world. They were a stadium-filling machine, with albums like Pyromania and Hysteria selling millions upon millions of copies. A huge part of their signature sound came from the guitar duo of Phil Collen and Steve Clark. Clark, nicknamed the Riffmaster, was a gifted songwriter and a charismatic performer. He co-wrote many of the band's biggest hits, including Photograph and Pour Some Sugar on Me. He had a knack for creating monster guitar hooks that you couldn't get out of your head. On stage, he was a picture of rock cool with his low-slung guitar and confident swagger. But not all things are what they seem. Behind the cool exterior, Steve Clark was fighting a terrible battle. His struggle with alcohol was an open secret within the band for years. His addiction was so severe that it became a major problem during the recording of Hysteria. His bandmates tried everything to help him. They would send him home from the studio, talk to him, and even stage interventions. The most shocking part is that during a break from the band, his fellow members found him passed out in a gutter in Minneapolis. They had to fly him to a treatment center. The band gave him a 6-month leave of absence in 1990 to get himself together. It was a final desperate attempt to save their friend. Tragically, it didn't work. In January of 1991, Steve Clark was found in his London home. He had accidentally mixed too much alcohol with prescription medication. He was only 30 years old. Clark's story is a heartbreaker, but for our next musician, the fall from grace was even more public and prolonged. 4. Johnny Lane. If you were alive in the early 1990s, you couldn't escape the song Cherry Pie. It was a massive hit for the glam metal band Warrant, and it turned their lead singer, Johnny Lane, into an overnight superstar. With his long blonde hair and pretty boy looks, he was the perfect frontman for the MTV generation. He wrote the song as a last-minute addition to the album, scribbling the lyrics on a pizza box in about 15 minutes. That one song defined his entire career, for better and for worse. Warrant sold millions of records, toured the world, and lived the high life. The thing nobody tells you is that Johnny Lane grew to hate that song. He felt it was a silly, shallow tune that overshadowed his more serious songwriting. He felt like a joke, and that feeling ate away at him for years. As the glam metal scene faded away, Lane's career began to struggle, and his reliance on the bottle grew stronger and stronger. What many overlooked was just how bad things got. His later years were a sad cycle of public intoxication, run-ins with the law for driving under the influence, and failed attempts at getting clean. To put it mildly, it was a slow-motion catastrophe. Friends and family watched helplessly as the man who once graced the cover of magazines became a shadow of his former self. In August of 2011, the final chapter was written. Johnny Lane was found in a Comfort Inn hotel room in Los Angeles, surrounded by bottles. He was only 47 years old. The Cherry Pie Guy's story is a classic tale of fame's dark side, but some stories of addiction go even further back. 5. David Byron. In the 1970s, Uriah Heep was one of the pioneers of heavy metal and progressive rock. With their soaring vocal harmonies, heavy organ sounds, and fantasy-themed lyrics, they created a unique style that won them a huge following. At the front of it all was their lead singer, or David Byron. He was a frontman in the classic sense of the word. He had a powerful, multi-octave voice and a flamboyant, theatrical stage presence that was absolutely captivating. He was the kind of singer who could hold an entire arena in the palm of his hand. He was a true rock god of his era. But you see, there was a dark side to his incredible talent. David Byron's drinking was legendary even in an era of legendary drinkers. The bottle was a constant companion, and it started to affect his performance and his reliability. The band grew tired of his erratic behavior. The most shocking fact is that things came to a head during a show in Philadelphia in 1976. Byron was so intoxicated on stage that he was singing off-key and slurring his words. The band had finally had enough. After the show, they made the difficult decision to fire him from the band he had helped build. It was a stunning fall from grace. He tried to launch a solo career and form other bands, but he could never recapture the magic. His addiction had taken its toll, and his voice was never the same. In 1985, at the young age of 38, David Byron's body finally gave out. Firing a singer is a drastic step, but our next star's band had to watch as he went down a similar path. 6. Phil Lynott. Phil Lynott was one of a kind. As the frontman, bassist, and main songwriter for the Irish band Thin Lizzy, he broke all the rules. He was a black man in a mostly white rock world, and he brought a poetic, romantic soul to the tough guy world of hard rock. His songs were stories filled with vivid characters and unforgettable melodies. Hits like The Boys Are Back in Town and Jailbreak are still classic rock radio staples. On stage, he was pure charisma with his signature afro, mirrored sunglasses, and confident swagger. He was a true poet of the streets. The thing nobody tells you, though, is that the romantic, wild man image he projected in his music was how he lived his life, especially when it came to partying. Phil's battles with his personal demons were well documented. He struggled with a lifestyle of excess that became inseparable from his identity. The bottle was a central part of that lifestyle. After Thin Lizzy broke up in 1983, his problems escalated. What many overlooked was that the end of the band left a huge void in his life, one that he tried to fill with more and more indulgence. To put it mildly, his health began to rapidly decline. In late 1985, after a binge at his home, he collapsed. He was rushed to the hospital, but the damage was already done. Years of heavy drinking and other bad habits had taken their toll. On January 4, 1986, Phil Lynott passed away at the age of 36. Lynott's story is a tragedy of a great artist consumed by his own legend. But what happens when addiction hits a band known for being the angriest in metal? 7. Jeff Hanneman. Slayer is one of the big four of thrash metal, known for their blistering speed, aggressive sound, and dark, controversial lyrics. For over 30 years, they were one of the most uncompromising bands in music. A huge part of their iconic sound came from the guitar work of Jeff Hanneman. He was not only a ferocious player, but also the band's main musical architect, writing the music for classic songs like Raining Blood and Angel of Death. His riffs were a masterclass in controlled chaos, and his contributions defined the very sound of thrash metal. But here's the kicker. While the band maintained a brutal public image, Hanneman was fighting a private war. He was a heavy drinker for most of his adult life, a habit that was quietly causing serious damage to his body. The situation took a bizarre and tragic turn in 2011. Hanneman was bitten by a spider, which led to a severe flesh-eating disease in his arm. He almost lost the arm entirely and had to undergo multiple surgeries. He was forced to step away from the band to recover. The most shocking fact is that while the spider bite was the immediate problem, his body's inability to heal was made much worse by his long-term alcohol abuse. His liver was failing. For the next 2 years, he struggled with his health. In May of 2013, Jeff Hanneman's body finally gave up. The official cause of his passing was alcohol-related cirrhosis. He was 49. A spider bite seems like a freak accident, but our next star's downfall was just as sudden and shocking. 8. Alexi Laiho. For a new generation of metalheads, Alexi Laiho was a guitar hero. As the frontman for the Finnish band Children of Bodom, he was a true virtuoso. He blended the speed and aggression of death metal with the melodic, classical-inspired solos of old-school heavy metal. His skill was breathtaking. He was known for his shredding ability, playing incredibly fast and complex passages with seeming ease. The band became one of Finland's best-selling musical acts of all time, and Alexi was their undisputed star, a charismatic and energetic leader. You see, like many rock stars before him, Alexi lived a life of constant touring and partying. The bottle was always present. He was open about his drinking, often seeing it as just part of the rock and roll lifestyle. But as the years went on, the habit began to take a serious toll. What many overlooked was the severity of the damage being done to his body. He suffered from stomach ulcers and other health issues that were directly related to his heavy consumption. His friends and family were deeply concerned, but he struggled to break the cycle. To put it mildly, he was burning the candle at both ends. The final shocking news came at the very end of 2020. Alexei Laiho passed away at his home in Helsinki. He was only 41 years old. It was later revealed that he had been suffering from long-term liver and pancreas degeneration caused by his years of alcohol abuse. It's tragic to lose such a young talent, but some artists' battles with the bottle are a lifelong struggle. 9. Gary Moore. Gary Moore, was a guitarist's guitarist. Hailing from Northern Ireland, he was a true virtuoso, respected by his peers for his incredible skill and emotional playing. He started his career with the classic rock band Thin Lizzy before launching a very successful solo career. He could play anything from blistering hard rock and heavy metal to soulful melodic blues. His 1990 album, Still Got the Blues, was a massive worldwide hit and introduced a whole new audience to his amazing talent. He was known for his intense, passionate performances and his signature guitar tone. But not all things are what they seem. Behind the incredible talent was a man who had a long and difficult relationship with alcohol. His drinking was a part of his life for decades, stretching all the way back to his early days in the music scene. While he managed to maintain a successful career for many years, the habit was always there, lurking in the background. The most shocking part of his story is how suddenly it all ended. In February of 2011, while on vacation in Spain, Gary Moore was found unresponsive in his hotel room. He had passed away in his sleep from a heart attack. He was 58 years old. An investigation later confirmed that he had consumed a massive amount of alcohol the night before, a level that was a key factor in his sudden passing. It was a tragic end for a man who still had so much music left to give. Moore's end was sudden and private, but our next star's struggles with the bottle were very loud and very public. 10. Kevin DuBrow. Quiet Riot was one of the bands that brought heavy metal to the mainstream in the 1980s. Their 1983 album, Metal Health, was the very first heavy metal album to ever hit #1 on the Billboard charts. At the front of it all was their loud, opinionated, and charismatic singer, Kevin DuBrow. With his powerful voice and energetic stage presence, he was the classic 80s rock frontman. The band's cover of the Slade song, Come On Feel the Noise, became an anthem for a generation of headbangers. The thing nobody tells you is that Kevin's personality was as loud off stage as it was on. He was known for being outspoken and for having a big mouth, which often got him into trouble with other bands and the press. That larger-than-life personality was fueled by a classic rock and roll lifestyle. The party never seemed to stop. But as the years went by, the partying took a darker turn. What many overlooked was the toll that years of indulgence were taking. After Quiet Riot's initial fame faded, DuBrow struggled to keep the band going through various lineup changes. His personal battles continued away from the spotlight. In November of 2007, friends became concerned when they couldn't reach him. He was found at his home in Las Vegas. The 52-year-old had passed away from an accidental overdose of a mix of substances, with alcohol being a major contributor. DuBrow's story is a familiar one, but the next musician's fall was part of a much darker scene. 11. Mike Starr. In the early 1990s, the music world was turned upside down by the grunge movement out of Seattle. Alice in Chains was one of the darkest and heaviest bands to come out of that scene. Their music was sludgy, powerful, and filled with a sense of gloom. A key part of their unique grinding sound was the bass playing of Mike Starr. He was a founding member of the band, and his heavy, driving bass lines were the foundation for their first two classic albums, Facelift and Dirt. But you see, the darkness in their music was a reflection of the band's real-life struggles. The Invincible band was caught in a downward spiral of heavy indulgence, and Mike Starr was right in the middle of it. His issues with addiction became so severe that it started to impact his ability to function in the band. To put it mildly, his life was becoming unmanageable. In 1993, at the height of the band's fame, he was asked to leave Alice in chains. The most shocking fact is that his life continued on a tragic path for years. He was in and out of trouble with the law and was even featured on the reality show Celebrity Rehab, where his struggles were broadcast for the world to see. Despite attempts to get clean, he could never escape his demons. In March of 2011, Mike Starr was found in a home in Salt Lake City. He was 44 years old. Losing a band member is devastating, but the next band on our list also lost their drummer far too young. 12. The Reverend, Avenged. Sevenpale exploded onto the metal scene in the 2000s with a sound that blended classic heavy metal with modern punk and metalcore. They became one of the biggest metal bands of their generation, known for their flashy guitar solos, catchy hooks, and incredible musicianship. A huge part of their creative force was their drummer, Jimmy the Rev Sullivan. He wasn't just a drummer, he was a multi-instrumentalist, a singer, and one of the band's primary songwriters. His drumming was wild and unpredictable, and his creative vision was all over their music. But here's the kicker. The Reverend lived a fast and furious life, much like the music he created. He was known for his wild personality and his love of partying. The lifestyle was an integral part of his identity. While the band was reaching new heights of success with their 2007 self-titled album, the Rev's personal habits were becoming a source of concern. What many overlooked was just how dangerous his lifestyle had become. He was mixing alcohol with various other substances, a combination that was putting his body under immense strain. The band was like a family, and they were worried about their brother. The tragedy struck in December of 2009. The Reverend was found at his home in Huntington Beach, California. He was only 28 years old. His passing was ruled an accidental overdose from a combination of prescription medications and alcohol. The loss of a creative heart is a blow few bands survive, but our next story involves a legal nightmare fueled by the bottle. 13. Dave Holland. From 1979 to 1989, Dave Holland was the drummer for the legendary Judas Priest. This was the band's golden era, the period when they released classic, genre-defining albums like British Steel and Screaming for Vengeance. Holland's powerful, straight-ahead drumming was the backbone of their sound during their rise to global superstardom. He was part of the machine that made Judas Priest one of the most important heavy metal bands in history. But the thing nobody tells you is that after he left the band, his life took a very dark turn. He continued to struggle with his personal demons, including a long-standing battle with the bottle. The story takes a truly shocking turn, though, with events that landed him in serious legal trouble. These issues, compounded by his ongoing problems with his habits, led to a complete downfall. He ended up serving time in prison, a turn of events that completely destroyed his reputation and career in music. After being released, he lived a very private life in Spain. To put it mildly, he had hit rock bottom. His health, battered by years of hard living and the stress of his legal battles, began to fail. In January of 2018, Dave Holland passed away at the age of 69. His life was a cautionary tale about how quickly things can fall apart. Holland's story is one of legal troubles, but our next star managed to pull back from the brink just in time. 14. Rob Halford. Rob Halford is the metal god. As the frontman for Judas Priest, he helped define the sound and the look of heavy metal. With his soaring, operatic vocals and his leather and studs fashion sense, he is one of the most iconic figures in music history. He commanded the stage with an unmatched power and presence. For decades, he has been the voice of heavy metal, a true legend who has influenced countless singers who came after him. But you see, for a long time, the metal god was hiding a secret pain. He struggled for years with his identity in a very conservative time, and he used alcohol as a way to cope with his inner turmoil. By the mid-1980s, his drinking had become a life-threatening problem. What many overlooked was just how close he came to the edge. He has since admitted that he was in a very dark place, and his addiction was consuming him completely. The turning point came in January of 1986. After a night of particularly heavy indulgence, he reached his lowest point. It was a wake-up call that he could not ignore. He checked himself into a treatment facility and has been sober ever since. The most shocking part is realizing that at the peak of their fame, the band was on the verge of losing its iconic voice forever. He managed to pull himself back from the edge and has continued his legendary career for decades. Halford found sobriety, but his former bandmate Ozzy Osbourne's battle with the bottle is perhaps the most famous in rock history. 15. Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy Osbourne is more than a musician. He's a cultural icon. As the original singer of Black Sabbath, he helped invent heavy metal. With his spooky wail and manic stage presence, he was the perfect frontman for their dark and heavy sound. After leaving Sabbath, he launched an incredibly successful solo career that made him an even bigger star. For better or worse, his name became synonymous with rock and roll excess. Biting the head off a bat is just one of the many wild stories that define his legend. The thing nobody tells you is just how much of that legend was fueled by, and nearly destroyed by, alcohol. Ozzy's consumption was off the charts, even by rock star standards. His drinking was so out of control that it got him fired from Black Sabbath in 1979. They simply couldn't work with him anymore. His solo career was plagued by his addiction. He would miss shows, give terrible performances, and his health was constantly in jeopardy. To put it mildly, he was a walking disaster. The most shocking fact is the sheer volume of his intake. He would reportedly drink multiple bottles of hard liquor every single day. He has admitted in interviews that he is amazed he is still alive. After decades of chaos, and with the unwavering support of his wife Sharon, Ozzy finally managed to get a handle on his addiction in the 2000s. Ozzy was fired from his band, but our next star's drinking nearly tore his own band apart from the inside. 16. James Hetfield. For millions of fans, Metallica is the biggest metal band on the planet, and James Hetfield is their heart and soul. With his ferocious rhythm guitar playing and his signature growl, he is one of the most recognizable figures in music. He wrote the riffs and the lyrics for a string of classic albums like Master of Puppets and the Black Album that changed the face of heavy metal forever. On stage, he is a commanding presence, a true general leading his army of fans. But here's the kicker. For years, the band had a nickname, Alcoholica. They were famous for their heavy partying ways in their early days. For Hetfield, however, it was more than just partying. It was a way of dealing with a troubled childhood and the pressures of fame. As the band got bigger, his reliance on the bottle grew deeper. The problem came to a head in the early 2000s during the chaotic recording of the Saint Anger album. The behind-the-scenes documentary, Some Kind of Monster, showed the world just how bad things had gotten. Hetfield's temper was flaring, he was fighting with his bandmates, and the band was on the verge of breaking up. The most shocking moment was when he abruptly left the studio and checked himself into a long-term treatment facility. No one knew if he would ever come back. The biggest metal band in the world was completely falling apart. Thankfully, he did come back, sober and ready to work, saving the band from total collapse. Hetfield's struggle was captured on film, and so was the near disaster of our next frontman. 17. Corey Taylor. Slipknot burst onto the scene in the late 1990s like a nightmare come to life. With their 9 members, terrifying masks, and chaotic, aggressive music, they were unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. At the center of the storm was their singer, Corey Taylor. Known as Number 8, he possessed a stunning vocal range, able to switch from brutal, guttural screams to beautiful, melodic singing in an instant. He was the voice of a new, angry generation of metal fans. But the chaos on stage was often matched by the chaos in his personal life. Corey Taylor has been very open about his long and brutal battle with alcohol. He started drinking heavily as a teenager to cope with a difficult upbringing. When Slipknot blew up, the rock star lifestyle only threw gasoline on the fire. What many overlooked was just how dark things got. He has described himself as a full-blown, raging alcoholic during the band's early years. The absolute lowest point came in 2003. At a party at the Rainbow Bar and Grill in Hollywood, he became so intoxicated that he tried to jump off a hotel balcony. His friend stopped him just in time. It was a terrifying wake-up call. That night, he knew he had to make a change. He has been sober for many years now, but he has never shied away from talking about how close he came to losing everything.